If you're somebody who suffers from back pain, a lot of times, not to minimize people that do have chronic bad backs, or they've been into a car accident, or they fell out of a tree or whatever, a lot of times, Nick, back pain is not actual back pain. Going back to what you just said, sometimes you can look at films and stuff, and these doctors are stumped because they see a clear spine. There's no herniation, there's no bulging disc, there's no pinching of a nerve coming off the spinal cord, and they're like, we don't know. I said, well, what does bread have to do with my back? And I said, listen, this is just a Mike Lynch philosophy, but I've seen it a lot of times, is your intestines are right by your lower back, your spinal erectors, okay? And if you're eating something for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and some snacks that's making your intestines inflamed, that's gonna have a systemic inflammation or cause systemic inflammation, plus your intestines are swollen.
Mike, did you know that 80% of people at some point in their life will deal with debilitating back pain?
I didn't know it was 80%, but that's pretty crazy.
It's a crazy number, and the number is just ticking up every 10, 15 years because we as human beings are stuck in positions that we were not designed for. So many people spend the majority of their day doing what we're doing right now, sitting, hunched over, looking at their phone, doing all these things that twist and contort their spine into a way that their body's not happy with. And it manifests itself as pain, back pain. And this is a huge problem. It's something that I've dealt with over the years. I know many people have dealt with it. And when your back is feeling bad, you're screwed. You're not doing anything. If your hand's in a little bit of pain, you can get through the day. If your back is in serious pain, you're laying down if you can. Some people can't lay down. Some people have to stand. It's a big problem.
Yeah. Know what's interesting about that 80%, Nick? 80% of the population, as we know, is obese. And obesity and back pain are best friends. So I wonder if that's why that number has gotten higher, because as you pack on weight, especially in the abdominal area, and we'll talk about the abdominals and the transversus abdominals, that could put a lot of load on your lower back. Because a lot of times, Nick, it's not a back problem. It's a muscle imbalance problem. It's an overweight problem. It's a inflammation of the intestines. We're going to unpack all that today.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to talk about, obviously small things that people can do to help themselves if they're having back problems, and give people a little bit of an insight about, why this might be happening, right? So
yeah,
we'll try to get into all that.
Absolutely.
One other eye-opening statistic that I found while I was going through researching this episode was that smokers have a 30% higher chance of dealing with back pain in their lifetime than non-smokers. So I don't know why that is, but if you needed another reason why you should quit smoking cigarettes, if you have back pain, that's a reason right there.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you shouldn't be smoking anyway, but if it's making your back pain worse, ditch the stogies. It's time.
Stogies, yeah. Listen, in 30 years training people, Nick, I've dealt with so many people that had back problems when we first started. And the good news is we got rid of it for the most part. And most people that come to me are probably not going to be cigarette smokers. So I was not aware of that statistic.
Mm-hmm. And this is, dealing with chronic pain, it changes the structure of your brain in the same way that people who have PTSD, because you're under constant duress, and it is debilitating, for mentally and physically. It's something that is not something I would wish upon my worst enemy.
Yeah, it's funny. As you know, Nick, I've had this foot problem, and I've had 3 surgeries, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out what's wrong in it. In my studying I have like my first year of podiatry school, by the way. I'm like, because of that. And I've read about chronic pain, and people, once they go past 6 months to a year, and I'm at 7 years, some people get to the point where they're actually suicidal, because the pain just never shuts off from the time they go to bed to the time they wake up, and even while they're in bed. When somebody has back pain, they even have tough time sleeping at night. They can't get comfortable, and then they're just adding chronic fatigue or a lack of sleep to that back problem.
Well, this is what happened to Kurt Cobain, right? I mean, Kurt Cobain killed himself because he had major, major long-term chronic stomach issues. He was in pain all the time. So, of course, I don't know exactly what was going on, but that's what I've heard. The guy was on top of the world.
Yeah.
Right? He had money, he had a family, he had an amazing band, he was a great songwriter. And, from the outside looking in, it looked like he had everything, but he was dealing with chronic pain. And to him, the best case solution at that point was to end it all.
Wow.
It's sad.
I did not know that either.
Yeah.
Already you hit me with two information bombs right off the Nirvana. The guy was dealing with, maybe he had gluten intolerance. Maybe if he would have saw our gluten video, if you haven't seen it, check it out. Maybe Kirk could just still be banging out, Teen Spirit.
I think unfortunately it's too late for Kurt, but it's not too late for the rest of our viewers, and hopefully they will get something out of these videos. And if they need to, go back and check out the gluten videos.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now you brought up gluten, and I was going to talk about this later, but let's just get right into it now.
Okay.
I had major, major, major back pain. I was in my early 30s. It shouldn't have been there, and I was getting MRIs. And this is one of the funny things about back pain is that some people who look like there's no problem are experiencing major pain, and then other people, they don't have any pain, and if you gave them an MRI, it would look like they should have pain.
That's correct.
So back problems are just these weird, weird things to deal with. A lot of times doctors simply don't know how to help, right? And so I had gone from this major back pain, went to see a doctor, sent me for some MRIs, I did all the testing, and they said, we don't know. We don't see anything that should be a problem. This shouldn't be a problem for you, but obviously you're having issues. And I was having major, major lower back pain. And I didn't know what the hell was going on. And the doctor's solution was painkillers.
Yeah.
Let's get you on painkillers. And thank God I said, no, thank you. Because look, painkillers can be really important if you've just gone through a surgery, if you had some, incident that's happened and you have an injury and you just got to get through it. But you always have to keep your eye on the prize, and the prize is getting off those painkillers. Because you do not want that to be a long-term solution, because it's going to make you a drug addict.
Right.
And it's going to cause constipation. It's going to cause all these other problems. So you really don't want that. And I knew that at that time, but I didn't know what to do. And through one of our mutual friends, I was told, maybe it could be dietary. Why don't you try taking gluten out of your diet? It seemed crazy at the time, but when you're in pain, you will try anything to change that, right? To get rid of that pain. And I did try it, and I got rid of my back pain.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds crazy. And the really messed up part is I went back to that same doctor after, and he's like, oh, how's your back pain? I'm like, actually, it's gone. I changed it with diet. And he was like, yeah, sure you did. He laughed at me. I never went back to that doctor. I was like, okay, obviously I'm not going to this doctor anymore, because he's not even open to the idea that perhaps something that he didn't think of might have helped me.
Right.
I don't know if that's ego or if that's just somebody who's so, entrenched in their old ways. They're unable to, look at anything from a different point of view. But anyway, long story short, I was able to conquer my back pain through dietary changes. And that is something that not a lot of people think of.
In fairness to all doctors, I don't know if things have changed lately, but I've trained many doctors over the last 30 years, Nick, and their education on nutrition is 0 to 1 day in medical school.
Wow.
And so me and Nick share the same really good friend, Matt, and he had the same problem with his back.
And Matt's who told me to try this.
Yeah. And he was going, I think he was ready to do a round of epidural shots.
Because Matt was also having major back problems.
Major back.
Before me.
And he had gone to...
And just to say it, Matt was in super shape. I mean, he was very fit. He was working out all the time. He was looking good, but he wasn't feeling good.
No. And he had sort of a handful of doctors, I believe. And I had told him a year beforehand, hey man, just try to take gluten out of your diet. And he kind of laughed at me or whatever. And then, no one wants to have big needles stuck in their spine. I think there's a series of them. And I remember I was on the line to Starbucks getting my coffee and drive through. And I said, hey man, before you do that, just go gluten-free for about 60 to 90 days. What do you have to lose? You'll probably lose some weight, but, and he said, what does bread have to do with my back? And I said, listen, this is just a Mike Lynch philosophy, but I've seen it a lot of times, is your intestines are right by your lower back, your spinal erectors, okay? And if you're eating something for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and some snacks that's making your intestines inflamed, that's going to have a systemic inflammation or cause systemic inflammation, plus your intestines are swollen, and that can actually be presenting itself in your back because your intestines are close to there, and maybe you slipped on ice or shoveled snow 20 years ago and you injured it and you don't remember. And when you have inflammation, Nick, it can kind of wake up stuff that was there, that maybe you had forgotten.
Old injuries,
Old injuries,
arthritis, different things like that.
playing freaking football in the field at your school when you were 6.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or maybe you slipped and you fell down a flight of stairs when you were younger, or anything like that. And lo and behold, boom. 6 weeks, 7 weeks later, he called me. He's like, bro, you're not going to believe it. My back is like totally better. And I was like, you see?
Actually, I am going to believe it because I'm the one who told you to do it.
And again, I didn't know if it was going to, but why not try? So we're going to talk about this. A lot of times, if you're somebody who suffers from back pain, a lot of times, not to minimize people that do have chronic bad backs, or they've been into a car accident, or they fell out of a tree, or whatever. A lot of times, Nick, back pain is not actual back pain. Going back to what you just said, sometimes you can look at films and stuff, and these doctors are stumped because they see a clear spine. There's no herniation, there's no bulging disc, there's no pinching of a nerve coming off the spinal cord, and they're like, we don't know, because there's a lot of other factors that can make somebody feel like they have a bad back.
Right.
And we should talk about like tight hips and hip flexors and hamstrings and stuff like that. And
Sure.
And exercises maybe people want to entertain and not entertain, and these are things that should give our viewers hope that they don't have this back pain that they've been plagued with. Some of these people have been plagued for years. I don't know how long you had yours for.
It was about a year. Yeah. So now, and just to say it, sometimes we'll say acute back pain, sometimes we'll say chronic. Acute pain is something that's 4 to 6 weeks and it kind of wraps itself up. And this happens sometimes, you're working outside, you tweak your back, it hurts you for a week or two, and then it goes away. And then that's normal, that happens. But the chronic pain is 6 weeks or longer, and sometimes 6 months, a year, years of pain, right? And that's something that people deal with all the time.
Right.
And then there are differences in pains. Sometimes it's like the sharp, head of a pin pain where it's in one point of your back. And then there's also the dull, achy, kind of wider pain that happens. And that wider pain is usually like a muscle issue. And the sharper pain that comes in a small little area can be a nerve damage issue. So those are things that people should kind of like look out for.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are some people that have actually nerves that are being compressed. Again, maybe they had some sort of trauma or a traumatic event. And sometimes, unfortunately, they do have to go under the knife and have a surgery or get epidural shots. And they can do all the exercises and take gluten out of their diet and stretch their muscles, but they still have this chronic back pain. The good news is, in 30 years of training people, Nick, I have never come across somebody that had back pain that we weren't totally able to fix. And I'll tell you one story quick. I'll leave names out, but my tattooer that did all my tats, he was doing somebody's artwork, and this guy was a Marine. He either fought in Afghanistan or what's the other one?
Iraq? Desert Storm?
Iraq. Thank you. I think it was Iraq. And he was actually a cop after he got out, and he became a SWAT team guy. Long story short, the Marines, they're maniacs, very trained. So he was very muscular and athletic his whole life. He was a wrestler in high school. So this was no slub, and he became a cop, and then he got on SWAT. Long story short, he got into a scuffle with a gang member, fell down a flight of stairs, hurt his back. They had to literally open up this guy's back, do surgery. He finally goes back to work like a year and a half out later. He's at an intersection and gets T-boned. Again, boom, they open this guy up. He's getting tattoos.
So his back is just worked. Hard. Yeah.
shot. He puts on 35, 40 pounds, gets probably depressed. He's sitting there kind of letting it all out on my tattooer. And he said, hey, man, you got to call my trainer. Guy comes in, Nick, okay, brings his films. I hold his films up. It looked like, if anybody's not old enough, like Herman Munster, bro. It was like rods and lag bolts all in this guy's back. So obviously there were certain exercises that I couldn't do with this guy, but we put him on an anti-inflammatory diet, got him doing some cardio that was low impact, strength train, build up all those muscles because he had been sedentary for years now. And I'll be honest, we did some stretching and stuff. Within a year, year and a half, he told me his back pain was totally gone. Now, he still had all the hardware in his back, and we didn't do things like deadlifts, and we didn't do squats or hyperextensions. I wouldn't entertain those exercises with him. I'm not currently training him anymore, so I don't know if he does these things now on his own, but this guy was totally we eradicated all his back pain. So now this is a guy that really had like major surgeries and hardware. It looked like Home Depot in his back.
Yeah.
You know?
So a couple things you said there, and I want to flesh those out for some of our viewers. You said you put him on an anti-inflammatory diet, and then you helped him do the right kind of training to help strengthen the muscles that would alleviate some of that pain. So walk us through some of that. What was the anti-inflammatory diet? Just a couple highlights from that people can implement into their own diets. And then also let's talk about a couple of the exercises that you were working on with that guy.
Right. So it was quite a while ago, Nick, but I probably put him on a high protein diet that was also complemented with fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
Okay. We definitely took gluten out, and I do believe we took dairy out.
Okay.
Because dairy can be very inflammatory for people as well. We probably had stuff like sweet potatoes and potatoes and gluten-free grains like white rice maybe, but it was predominantly lean proteins.
Yep.
Removing saturated fat because saturated fat can be inflammatory as well.
Oh.
And lots of fruits and vegetables. So that was the diet, Nick.
Okay. Okay. And then exercising. As far as I know, if you're having back pain, you actually want to work on your core. Is that right?
Correct. So we definitely worked his abdominals. And again, with the abdominal exercises, we were kind of limited as well because of that spine. When you do abdominal,
not doing sit-ups.
Yeah, we weren't doing anything weighted. We were doing some crunches and some static holds, some push-up planks, not where he's leaning on his forearms, but just holding push-ups at the top.
Sure.
And it was really a matter of getting his abdominal wall back down, lean and mean, taking that extra weight off and stretching out the abdominals.
Because the extra weight, if you're holding it in front of you, it's putting more strain on your back, right?
Ask a pregnant woman how their back feels at the end of their pregnancy. They're miserable. Here's the reason why, Nick. When we think about our abdominals, right? So every muscle has an opposing muscle. Your bicep to your tricep.
Sure.
Your quadricep to your hamstring. Your chest to your back. They support one another, okay? So when you talk, most people are going to have, for the most part, lower back pain.
That's the majority of pain.
Yes,
sure.
Not to say you can't have upper back pain, but you're going to have lower back pain. Those are your spinal erectors. Well, what's the opposing muscles to that? Your abs. Everybody says their core. And what they're talking about is the rectus abdominis. But below that, we have a thing called the transversus abdominals. And it looks like a corset. Okay. So when someone gets fat or they get pregnant, if you can see this, it kind of does this and they spread apart. So it's the abdominals from your belly button down to your pubic bone. And now if this is played and it's what's called hypotonic, you have hypertonic, which is tight, and hypotonic is loose and flimsy. Now, if these abdominals, getting fat, pregnant, or just sitting around and not using them, they kind of get lax. And they're more of like a belt that holds your back and supports your lower back. So Was it the abdominal work that we did? I don't know, Nick. I think it was more the fact that we got the inflammation in his body quelled and we took all that extra body fat off and those abdominal wall came back in, strengthened his lower back. And we did that with just, stuff like walking lunges and maybe a little bit of twists and stuff like that. And just pull down. You're using your back for everything that you do. So it was a really comprehensive thing. I will tell you with this gentleman and anybody that has chronic back pain, we always take out deadlifts, squats, and hyperextensions.
So squats are bad for your back.
In the beginning. Now, some people like this guy, I was not comfortable as his trainer ever making him do those. Okay, we did lunges and we did some modified leg press machines and we did reverse lunges and body weight squats, but loading his spine up with a bar, I was not comfortable doing that.
Okay.
There might be trainers out there that do that and that's their business. Now, if somebody has back pain that doesn't show on an MRI, a lot of times this is just muscle imbalances. And we may not do those exercises in the beginning, but those are great exercises. So what we'll do is what we avoid with some people in the beginning is not something that we avoid once their chronic back pain goes away, because a lot of times it's just the muscles are in spasm because they have tight muscles that are opposing to that. So in the beginning, I don't entertain those exercises with anyone that's saying they have a bad back.
But if you don't have a bunch of metal in your back, you can work your way back towards the squats and maybe the deadlift and things like that.
And the problem with the squat and the deadlift, not so much a hyperextension. And if you don't know what a hyperextension is, just do a quick search online. You'll find it. It's a machine where you kind of get strapped in, you lean forward, and it works your spinal erectors and your glutes and your hamstring, your whole what's called posterior chain. Very good, safe exercise for most people. If the squat and the deadlift are very technical exercises, so if you do not feel comfortable, Nick, performing them correctly, you shouldn't do them at all because the risk is just not worth it.
You can hurt your knees, you can hurt your back.
Yeah, especially if you're dealing with a back problem. But yes, lower back, knees, hips, groin, they're very effective exercises, but if you do them wrong, they could be disastrous.
Okay.
So if you don't have a trainer that you trust or somebody that, has a proven track record and you're kind of on the fence, am I doing these right? You're probably, better off just leaving them alone.
But what I am hearing from you is that if you are having back pain and you got a couple extra pounds in the stomach area, probably should start working on getting rid of those extra lbs, because that can really help out what's going on in the back.
And again, it's because those transversus abdominals are stretched out, your rectus abdominis, and also you have your internal and external obliques, and they help keep everything in alignment. And basically, two other things we want to talk about quick, Nick, I'm going to stand up, is a tight muscle called the hip flexor. Your hip flexor are muscles that come here.
Sure.
And when you sit down, they're engaged. Okay. And if those are tight, they're going to pull you forward. So what are you going to do? By default, you're going to force it's happening all day long. Now, if you think about it, Nick, if you were to kick me right now, you can probably generate a lot of force and knock me out because those hip flexor muscles are so tight, but a tight muscle is usually a very strong muscle. Think about if you went to knee me, Nick, what kind of force you can generate. So if those hip flexors are tight, if you have tight hamstrings, these can be tugging on your lower back all day long. And it's not a back problem. You feel it in your back, but it's a muscle imbalance problem. Your glutes are weak. So you need to stretch out the quads, the hip flexors, most importantly, the hamstrings, and strengthen the lower back, the glute muscles, the upper back, and back pain just disappears.
Now, this is something that so many people are dealing with because so many people are sitting for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Our bodies were not designed to do this. This is a really big issue. You're increasing your chances of back problems if your job entails you sitting around all the time.
Yeah.
This is a really big deal. And not only that, so there's the sitting and you're at your desk and you're looking at your computer, and then there's also the phone. People have their necks kicked down like this and they're looking at their phone how much time during the day. So you go from looking down at your computer screen to looking down at your phone. You're seated weird. These are things that are destroying people. And of course, we have to keep our jobs. We have to go to work, throughout the week, most of us, right? Unless you're retired or independently wealthy. But there are ways that we can avoid some of the damage that this type of thing does to us. One of the things is to make sure that the screen you're looking at your desk, if you are sitting at a desk on a computer all day, is raised up so that your eye line is looking right at the top of that screen. The top of that screen area should be right about in level with where your eyes are at. If you're looking too far down or too far up, you're going to kink that neck and that's going to throw you all off, right? Another thing, keep in mind, you want your knees to be just below your hips. So you want your seat raised up to a point where your knees are just below your hips and your feet are flat on the ground. That's going to be a more natural way for you to sit and perhaps help you avoid some of that back pain. And take the wallet out of your back pocket or the phone out of your back pocket or really whatever's in your back pocket. Take it out, because if you're seated just a little bit off, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a big deal, but after hours, days, weeks, months, years, this can create major, major imbalances in your body.
Huge. And what you're talking about with the texting and everything like that, you got to think, Nick, that's not happening for a few minutes. That's happening sometimes for hours per day. And then again, back to those two terms I used, I'm going to turn sideways. If I'm doing this and I'm doing this, I'm getting hypertonic here and I'm getting hypotonic in my back. And I'm hunched more, which is I can feel it in my lower back just doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need to do is stand tall with our shoulders back, not look like a total asshole, like some of the guys we see in gyms, like, oh, I lift weights, but getting that hypertonic, stretching out the pec muscles, strengthening the upper back, and really doing what you're talking about, putting that screen at the approach so you're not bending over, because all our structures, think about somebody who's really old, Nick, those people that none of us want to turn into, that we see at the grocery store, their little old lady or an old man with the cane. No one's aging upright. I call it the death dive, right? So we're all just crunching forward like a little shrimp, right? And you have to fight that with all your might. And when you're doing this all day long and you're doing stupid exercises and you're eating inflammatory foods, a lot of times, boom, it goes right to that lower back. And that's why so many of these doctors that have great intentions are stumped, and they're saying, I don't understand. There's nothing on your spinal cord. You should have no back problem. Because it's not a back problem. It's a muscle imbalance problem.
Right.
It's a lifestyle problem. It's occupational overuse, and it's chronic inflammation that you're eating at breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks.
Now, another thing people can do at the office, if they are in a job where they're seated in one position for long periods of time, is set a timer and get up every half hour, 45 minutes, just for a little bit of a change. Even if it's standing at your desk, if you got to take a phone call, stand up and take the phone call if you're at your desk. If you got to send something to, if you got to talk to somebody across the office, don't call them, walk over there and do it. Whatever it is, try to reset yourself at least once an hour, if not twice an hour, so that you can change that positioning and straighten yourself out and then come back to it. Those can be, really helpful for people over long periods of time.
Absolutely. And you know how I found that out, Nick? Because I don't even think about something like that. A lot of people may not know, but I have a foot injury. I've had 3 foot surgeries, so I cannot walk the treadmill anymore for cardiovascular, so I ride the stationary bike, Nick. When I sit on the stationary bike, I find sometimes that I start to slump from being on the stationary bike, and I start to feel it in my lower back.
Yep.
Sometimes I just get off the stationary bike, I get on the floor and I just do some crunches, and I get back on, and it's like my back it started to really be hot and starting to bother me, literally getting off the bike, crunching for 30 seconds just to get the break from the bike. I'm not trying to actively train my abdominals.
Yeah.
And I get back on and I'm good for like another 15, 20 minutes now.
Wow.
It was that 30-second break from being in that same position. So what you're saying, although it sounds like, oh, get up every, 30, just a minute can make a huge difference.
In addition to all that, stress is a big part of this, because as we hold on to stress, we are tense, and we hold that in our jaws, grinding teeth. We hold that in our back as well. And so de-stressing can also be a way for people to try to get rid of some of this chronic pain. And of course, none of these are going to be the magic bullet to help people get rid of pain altogether, but little by little, you can make incremental changes that will benefit you in the long run. And de-stressing, finding something that you can do to try to let go of some of that stress, can really be beneficial for back pain.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've never done it, but even like classes that de-stress and stretch you out, like yoga or Pilates or something like that, killing two birds with one stone, so they say, right? Like,
Yoga is really helpful. I mean, depending on the yoga teacher, and just let go. If you're starting out with yoga and being good at it, it's okay. No one cares. No one's looking at you. It's the same thing with the gym, right? There's like a little bit of a stress that goes along with going into a new situation. If you've never been to the gym, if you've never been to a yoga class, you go in there and you think everybody is looking at you and judging you. But let me tell you, no one cares.
yeah.
No one cares. And if they do care, they suck. So don't even worry about them, right? But you go to that yoga class, and especially there are yoga classes that are designed for mobility, not strength.
Right.
And you can really stretch yourself out and feel 1,000 times better. And maybe just do 10 minutes of yoga at your house. There's plenty of yoga all over YouTube, right? Now you got to make sure you find the right person and you find like an easy class to start. But there's yoga for back pain, yoga for hip stretching, yoga for this, yoga for that. It can be really helpful. I wanted to talk a little bit about people who have back injuries not knowing whether they should use heat or cold
Right.
to deal with these injuries, right? And I know that both have their place, but could you kind of break that down for us a little bit? When's the right time to use heat? When's the right time to use cold? And maybe there isn't or there is. I don't know.
No, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. So when it's hot and it just happens, like if you went to the gym, you went to squat and you pulled something, or you out doing some yard work, or God forbid you got into a little bit of a car crash or something like that. For the first couple of days, ice is going to be the way to go. It doesn't feel good because you're already in pain, and ice generally doesn't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Especially after a couple of minutes. Ice can actually be painful, but you want to quell that inflammation. When you have trauma, your body has an inflammatory response, and there's actually some studies saying now, like, not to try to bring the inflammation down, that the inflammation actually has its place. So not to try to, because the hot word in the fitness industry in the last couple of years is inflammation. Oh, everybody's super inflamed. Inflammation is there for a reason. So you don't want to totally eradicate inflammation, but you don't want to be so inflamed that now you can't move. So for the first 24 to 72 hours, we're going to do ice. Then and this is any injury, Nick. And then after that, what we want to do is we want to do ice, heat, shampooing, rinsing, right? So it's 10 to 15 minutes of ice. And what that does is pushes all the inflammation out, pushes all that toxic blood and all the stuff that's bad in there. And then by putting heat, the heat feels really good. It's soothing, but it draws new blood into the area to help turn over new tissue and help with the recovery.
Okay.
So in the beginning, when it's on fire and it's brand new, ice for about 2 to 3 days, and then you do ice heat mixture 10 to 15 minutes, unless your doctor tells you otherwise.
Rest is a big part of that as well, but at a certain point, you got to let go of the rest and you got to start moving again, right?
Yes. As long as it's not making the pain worse, then obviously this is something that somebody would want to talk to the doctor or the physical therapist with. But yes, you're right. Actually, Nick, I'm sure it can happen other places in the body. But when somebody hurts their shoulder, if they don't move their shoulder and they start babying it, they actually get a thing called the frozen shoulder, where they actually have to put the person under and rip their arm, like rip it and tear, or like scar tissue starts to form and everything like that. It's supposedly very painful, a frozen shoulder. And that is just from keeping the shoulder from moving. They're so immobilized that they actually start to get a frozen shoulder where they actually can't move it. So I'm sure that this can happen anywhere in the body. But yes, once you get that inflammation down, you want to start to gently move and get your body moving again to increase blood flow and get yourself active again.
Now, of course, like you said, there can be injuries. There are reasons to go see a doctor to get real help. But a lot of times, as you said earlier, back problems are not a result of an injury in your back, right? They're an imbalance. They're a muscle imbalance. They're another problem in your body. And there are ways to combat these without injections, without surgeries, without going through really invasive measures that can mess us up even further.
Yeah. And again, I mean, 30 years doing this, I mean, back pain is one of the biggest things that you deal with as a trainer. And I'm happy to say that there hasn't been anybody to date that I haven't been able to help or totally, I don't want to use the word fix and sound like some arrogant guy, but eradicate that back pain. Even somebody that had 2 major surgeries that had super hardware in their back, we were still able to really dial down. Now, did they have a day or he have a day where it was raining and maybe it bugged his back a little bit? Sure. But like you said, Nick, not to minimize anybody that's been into a car wreck or had an accident at work or something like that. And sometimes, unfortunately, we do have to do surgeries or do these epidural shots, and they can be life-changing in a good way.
Sure.
But for a lot of people, the real great takeaway from this podcast today is a lot of times the back pain that somebody is experiencing or somebody they love is experiencing is just inflammation, tight muscles, weak muscles, and really can be totally eradicated or brought from a 10 down to like a 2, where it's, if you're in pain and you're at a 10, you would pay lots of money to get to a 2.
Sure.
So
yeah. All right. So
this is a major
takeaways from
thing.
this episode: make sure you're doing those core exercises, right? Make sure you're trying to lose that excess body fat,
Especially in the abdominal region.
Really take a critical look at how you sit all day long, the height of that monitor, where you hold that phone when you're looking at it, how high your chair is. You might be messing yourself up and not even realizing it by just doing the simple things throughout the day, right?
Right.
And also try to set that timer and get up every half hour, 45 minutes. Move yourself around, right? Change that position. That can really be very helpful for people who are experiencing chronic back pain.
Yeah, all these little things add up to a big outcome.
And make sure you're eating foods that are not causing inflammation as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this can be a real reason to change around your diet. So I feel like we say this every time, but eat healthy, do some strength training, make sure, you're doing all these things, and it's going to be really helpful for back pain.
Yeah. Get to an ideal body weight. That's huge. Ideal body weight is, the older I get, Nick, I realize how healthy it is across the board to be at an ideal body weight. And it's not about vanity.
And
yes, you'll look good, Nick, but as far as heart disease, diabetes, cancer prevention, back problems, ideal body weight's where it's at.
Right. And, I had said earlier that I was able to conquer my back pain through dietary changes. I also lost a little weight. So when I cut gluten out, not only did it probably cut down on my inflammation, but it also helped me shave a few pounds. So probably both those things helped with my back pain.
Yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah. Generally, if you have a problem and there is a fix through diet and exercise, it makes everything else. You get other benefits along the way.
Well, thank you everybody for watching today. I really hope that you enjoyed the episode on back pain. If you are experiencing back pain, I hope that some of the things we talked about today can help you minimize that pain and get you to a place where it's either almost gone or totally gone. Your posture, your exercise, all these things can really make a difference. If it did help, leave us a comment, share this video. If it didn't help and we should talk about something else in regard to back pain, let us know. Leave a comment and we'll definitely entertain that. Mike?
Like Nick said, if we forgot anything or you have a story that you would like to share below, we'd love to hear it.
For sure.
So that's it. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Please hit the like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any content in the future.